The laundress's hands were bloodied from scrubbing when the gunshot rang out across Jerome, Arizona. And while everyone else ran toward the saloon, she kept working because no one would notice if she stayed or went anyway. Beatrice Thompson had lived in Jerome for 3 years, operating a laundry service out of a cramped building wedged between the assayer's office and a boarding house. The year was 1881, and the copper mining town clung to the side of Mingus Mountain like a desperate prayer. Beatrice was 32 years old, heavy-set in a way that made her nearly invisible to the men who passed her doorway every day. She had learned long ago that being a large woman in the territories meant existing in a strange liminal space, present but unseen, necessary but ignored. The gunshot had been nothing serious, just 2 miners settling a dispute over a card game. By the time Beatrice finished with the blood-stained linens she had been working on, the excitement had died down, and the street returned to its usual chaos of ore wagons, mules, and dust-covered men trudging between the mines and the saloons. She hung the sheets on the line strung across the back of her shop, her arms aching from the effort. The copper-tainted wind whipped through the canyon, carrying the acrid smell of smelter smoke. Her fingers were raw and cracked, despite the lard she rubbed into them each night. This was her life, and she had made peace with it, or so she told herself during the long evenings when she sat alone eating supper by lamplight. Beatrice had been married once, back in Missouri. Her husband had died of cholera 6 months after their wedding, leaving her with nothing but debts and a reputation as an unlucky woman. She had sold everything, packed what remained into a single trunk, and headed west with a wagon train. Jerome had seemed as good a place as any to disappear into the anonymity of hard work. The bell above her shop door jangled as she came back inside, startling her. A man stood in the doorway, hat in his hands, silhouetted against the bright afternoon sun. "Excuse me, madam," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "I was told you do laundry and mending." Beatrice wiped her damp hands on her apron. "That's right. What do you need?" He stepped inside, and she could see him properly now. He was tall and lean, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His clothes marked him as a cowboy, working range clothes, rather than the mining garb most men wore in Jerome. He looked to be in his mid-30s, with the kind of quiet watchfulness that came from years spent in open country. "I've got a bag of clothes that need washing, and a shirt that needs the sleeve reattached," he said, meeting her eyes directly. "I'm told you do good work." Beatrice felt herself flush slightly under his gaze. Most people looked past her or through her, their eyes sliding away as if she were part of the furniture. This man looked at her like she was a person worth seeing. "I can do that," she said, keeping her voice steady. "When do you need it by?" "No particular hurry. I'm going to be in town a few days at least." He set a canvas bag on her counter. "Name's Benjamin Hawthorne. I'm up from the valley bringing cattle through to Prescott." "Beatrice Thompson," she replied, opening the bag to assess the contents. The clothes were well worn but good quality, the kind a working cattleman would wear. The shirt with the torn sleeve had been ripped rather than worn through. "This looks like it got caught on something." "Barbed wire," Benjamin said with a slight grimace. "New fence some rancher put up without proper warning. My horse spooked and I got tangled trying to get him clear." She examined the tear. "I can fix this so you would barely see the mend. Give me 2 days. That would be fine." He paused, then added, "What do I owe you?" She quoted her standard price, which was fair but not cheap. She had learned early on that charging too little made people value her work less. Benjamin nodded and counted out half the sum from a worn leather purse. "I'll pay the rest when I collect," he said. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled at her. It was a genuine smile that reached his eyes and created creases at their corners. "Thank you, Miss Thompson. I appreciate good workmanship." After he left, Beatrice stood for a long moment holding his torn shirt, feeling strangely unsettled. The interaction had been perfectly ordinary, a simple business transaction. Yet something about the way he had looked at her, really looked at her, had pierced through the armor of invisibility she had built around herself. She shook her head and got to work. There were 3 other orders to complete before she could start on Benjamin Hawthorne's clothes, and the afternoon was already wearing on. That evening, as she sat mending his shirt by lamplight, she found herself thinking about him more than was sensible. It had been so long since anyone had truly seen her, had met her eyes and spoken to her as if she mattered. She told herself not to make too much of simple courtesy, but her treacherous heart had already begun to hope. The next morning brought a rush of business. The mining company supervisor's wife, Mrs. Caldwell, arrived with an enormous bundle of fine linens and very particular instructions. She was a pinch-faced woman who spoke to Beatrice as if addressing a slightly dim servant, never quite looking at her directly. "These must be done perfectly, Mrs. Caldwell said, her voice sharp. "No starch in the pillowcases, but heavy starch in the table linens, and do be careful with the lace trim on my nightdresses." "Yes, madam," Beatrice said patiently. She had dealt with women like Mrs. Caldwell before, women who needed someone to feel superior to, and found that target in the large, plain laundress. After Mrs. Caldwell departed in a rustle of silk skirts, Beatrice hauled water from the well behind her shop and set it heating over the stove. The work was grueling and never-ending, but it was hers. She answered to no one, depended on no one, and that independence was worth the aching muscles and raw hands. She was elbow-deep in soapy water when the bell jangled again. This time it was Benjamin Hawthorne, and he looked concerned. "Miss Thompson, I apologize for bothering you," he said, "but I was hoping you might be able to help me with something else." "What is it?" She dried her hands, aware of how disheveled she must look with her hair escaping its pins and her dress damp with water. "I need to find a place to board my horse for a few extra days. The livery is full up with the freight company's mules, and the stable hand suggested you might know someone with space." Beatrice considered. "There's old Mr. Chen who has a stable up the hill. He usually has room and he treats animals well. I can draw you a map." "I would appreciate that." Benjamin watched as she sketched out directions on a scrap of brown paper. "You know the town well. I've been here 3 years. You learn the lay of things." She handed him the paper. He studied it, then looked back at her. "Would you happen to know a decent place to get a meal? The hotel dining room is tolerable, but I was hoping for something with a bit more character." "The Chinese restaurant 2 streets over," Beatrice said without hesitation. "Mrs. Wang cooks better than anyone in town, but most people do not go there because it is not a white establishment." Benjamin's expression shifted into something approving. "Then that is exactly where I will go. Thank you, Miss Thompson. You have been very helpful." After he left, Beatrice found herself smiling as she returned to her washing. He had asked her opinion, valued her local knowledge. Such small things, yet they warmed something inside her that had been cold for a very long time. The afternoon heat grew oppressive, turning the shop into a steam bath as she worked through Mrs. Caldwell's linens. Sweat plastered her hair to her forehead and soaked through her dress. This was the reality of her work, unglamorous and exhausting, the kind of labor that left her body aching and her hands permanently reddened. She was hanging sheets when she heard shouting from the street. A fight had broken out between 2 miners, something about claim jumping. Men formed a rough circle as the 2 combatants rolled in the dirt, throwing wild punches. Beatrice watched from her doorway for a moment, then turned back to her work. Such violence was common enough in Jerome, where desperation and drink in proximity bred conflict. By the time evening came, she was thoroughly exhausted. She fixed herself a simple supper of beans and cornbread, then sat down to finish Benjamin's mending. The shirt sleeve took patience and fine stitching, but she lost herself in the familiar rhythm of needle and thread. When she finished, she held it up to the lamp, examining her work critically. The mend was nearly invisible, the stitches small and even. He would be able to wear this shirt for years more if he took care of it. She found herself wondering about Benjamin Hawthorne as she prepared for bed. What had brought a cattleman to Jerome? The grazing was poor on these rocky slopes, and most ranchers kept to the valleys. He must be passing through, moving stock to market or new range. He would collect his laundry and ride out of her life as quickly as he had entered it. The thought brought an unexpected pang of loss, which irritated her. She barely knew the man. One smile and a few polite words, and here she was mooning like a girl over him. She was too old and too practical for such nonsense. But lying in her narrow bed, listening to the sounds of the town settling for the night, she could not quite silence the small voice that whispered he had seen her, really seen her, and that meant something even if she did not yet know what. The next day was Sunday, which meant slightly less business as many people attended church services. Beatrice did not go to church regularly. The looks and whispers from the proper ladies of Jerome, the way they edged away from her bulk in the pews, had driven her away years ago. She kept her faith private now, saying her prayers alone in her shop. She was working on a complicated stain removal, one that required careful application of different solutions, when Benjamin arrived to collect his laundry. "Good morning, Miss Thompson," he said, and again there was that direct eye contact that made her feel visible. "I hope I am not too early." "Not at all. Your things are ready." She retrieved the carefully folded stack of clean clothes and the mended shirt. "I think you will find everything in order." Benjamin examined the shirt closely, running his fingers over the repaired sleeve. "This is exceptional work. I can barely tell where the tear was." He looked up at her with genuine appreciation. "You have a real skill." "Thank you," Beatrice said, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "I take pride in doing things properly." He paid the remainder of what he owed, then hesitated. "Miss Thompson, I wonder if I might ask you something." "Of course. I took your advice about Mrs. Wang's restaurant. The food was excellent, and she was kind enough to tell me some about the history of Jerome. But she mentioned that you sometimes have trouble getting supplies delivered because you live alone, and the freight company's manager does not prioritize your orders." Beatrice felt her face heat with embarrassment. It was true, but she had not expected Mrs. Wang to mention it to anyone. "I manage well enough." "I am sure you do," Benjamin said carefully. "But I noticed today that there are several heavy crates sitting at the freight office with your name on them. I have a wagon and time this afternoon. I would be happy to deliver them for you if you would allow it." She opened her mouth to refuse, instinct telling her not to accept charity, but something in his expression stopped her. He was not offering out of pity. He was simply being kind, the way neighbors helped each other in small communities. "That would be very helpful," she admitted. "The freight manager always promises delivery but never seems to get around to it. I need those supplies, and they are too heavy for me to haul myself." "Then consider it done. I will bring them by this afternoon." True to his word, Benjamin arrived several hours later driving a sturdy wagon. He had loaded all 4 of her crates, managing what would have taken her multiple trips and considerable struggle. He carried each crate into her storeroom with easy strength, stacking them where she directed. "I cannot thank you enough," Beatrice said when he finished. This saves me days of frustration dealing with the freight company. It was no trouble. Benjamin wiped his hands on his trousers. I was wondering, Miss Thompson, if you might let me buy you supper at Mrs. Wang's as a thank you for your help with the horse boarding and your excellent work on my clothes. Beatrice stared at him, certain she had misheard. You want to buy me supper? If you would not find it too forward. I do not know many people in town, and I enjoyed talking with you. But if you would rather not, I understand completely. Her mind raced through a dozen reasons to refuse. What would people say, seeing her at a restaurant with a man? What if he was only being polite and did not really want her company? What if he was mocking her somehow? But the earnestness in his face gave lie to her fears. He was simply asking her to share a meal, one human being to another. I would like that, she heard herself say. Give me a moment to change into something cleaner. She retreated to her small living quarters behind the shop, her heart hammering. She had one decent dress, dark blue calico, that she wore on the rare occasions she needed to look respectable. She changed quickly, pinned her hair more neatly, and splashed water on her face. Looking in her small mirror, she saw what she always saw, a plain, heavy woman with tired eyes. But perhaps, just perhaps, Benjamin Hawthorne saw something more. They walked to Mrs. Wang's restaurant together as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. The streets of Jerome were built on such steep slopes that walking required attention, and Beatrice had to lift her skirts to avoid tripping on the uneven ground. Mrs. Wang greeted them warmly, her weathered face creasing into a smile when she saw Beatrice with Benjamin. She seated them at a small table near the window and brought tea without being asked. I did not expect to see you again so soon, Mrs. Wang said to Benjamin in her accented English. And with Miss Beatrice, good. She works too hard, never takes time to enjoy life. Mrs. Wang, Beatrice protested, embarrassed. Is truth, the older woman said firmly. I bring you my special duck you will like. After she bustled away, Benjamin smiled. She seems very fond of you, she is kind. When I first came to Jerome, I was very ill with mountain fever. Mrs. Wang brought me soup every day until I recovered. She would not let me pay her for it. That is real kindness, Benjamin said. The kind that costs something. They talked as they waited for their food, tentative at first, then with growing ease. Benjamin told her about his ranch in the Verde Valley, a small operation he had built up over 10 years of hard work. He ran cattle and broke horses, living alone except for a hired hand who helped during busy seasons. It is not much, he said, but it is mine. No one can take it from me or tell me I do not belong there. Beatrice heard the echo of old pain in those words. Where are you from originally? Kentucky. My father was a blacksmith and I learned the trade from him, but after the war things were difficult. A lot of men came back from fighting, all needing work, and there was not enough to go around. I decided to try my luck out west. My husband and I planned to go west together, Beatrice said quietly, but he died before we could. I came anyway because there was nothing left for me in Missouri. I am sorry for your loss. It was a long time ago. She met his eyes. You build a new life from what remains. The food arrived, and it was as good as Beatrice had promised. They ate and talked, and Beatrice found herself relaxing in a way she had not in years. Benjamin asked about her work, genuinely interested in the details of stain removal and fabric care. He told her stories about cattle drives and stubborn horses, making her laugh with his wry observations. As the evening deepened into night, Mrs. Wang brought them almond cookies and more tea. The restaurant had emptied and they were the last customers remaining. I should let you close, Benjamin said reluctantly to Mrs. Wang. No hurry, no hurry. You young people enjoy. Young people. Beatrice almost laughed at that. She was 32 and felt twice that age most days. But sitting here with Benjamin, talking and laughing, she felt something she had almost forgotten, the possibility of joy. Benjamin walked her back to her shop through the lamplit streets. The night air was cool, a relief after the heat of the day. Outside her door, he paused. "Thank you for joining me," he said. "I have not enjoyed an evening so much in a long time." "Neither have I," Beatrice admitted. "I will be in town a few more days. The cattle deal I came to arrange is taking longer than expected. Would you allow me to call on you again?" Her breath caught. "Why?" The question came out before she could stop it, blunt and graceless. Benjamin did not seem offended. "Because I enjoy your company," he said simply. "Because you are intelligent and kind and interesting to talk to. Because when I am with you, I feel like I can be myself." He paused. "Is that not reason enough?" Beatrice wanted to ask what he could possibly see in her, wanted to point out all the reasons this was absurd, wanted to protect herself from the inevitable disappointment. But something in his steady gaze stopped her. "You can call on me," she said softly. His smile was like sunrise. "Tomorrow evening, then. Tomorrow evening." She lay awake long that night, her mind spinning. This could not be real. Men did not court women like her. They married pretty girls, slender girls, girls who fit into the narrow confines of what women were supposed to be. Yet Benjamin had looked at her like she was exactly what he had been searching for, and she did not know what to do with that. Sleep finally came, and with it dreams of open country and a man whose eyes saw past the surface to the person beneath. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Beatrice threw herself into work, trying to keep her mind occupied, but she found herself watching the clock and smoothing her hair unnecessarily. This was foolish. She was too old to flutter over a man like a girl at her first dance. But when Benjamin arrived that evening, freshly shaved and carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers, her heart leaped despite all her stern self-lectures. "I remembered you said you had no time to enjoy life," he said, offering her the flowers. "I thought these might brighten your shop." They were simple flowers, the kind that grew wild on the hillsides, but Beatrice received them like precious jewels. She found a jar to put them in, arranging them carefully while Benjamin waited. "Would you like to walk with me?" he asked. "There is a spot up the hill where you can see the whole valley spread out. The sunset from there is worth the climb." They made their way up the steep streets, past the mine works and the smelter, to where Jerome's buildings gave way to rocky slopes dotted with juniper and scrub oak. The climb left Beatrice breathless, her legs aching, but she refused to complain. Benjamin matched his pace to hers, never rushing or showing impatience. The view from the spot he had found was indeed spectacular. The Verde Valley spread below them in shades of gold and purple as the sun sank toward the distant peaks. The air smelled of dust and wild sage, and a hawk circled lazily on the thermal currents rising from the heated rocks. "Worth the walk?" Benjamin asked. "Very much so." Beatrice had lived in Jerome for 3 years and had never come up here, never taken the time to see the beauty surrounding her daily struggle for survival. They sat on a flat boulder, and Benjamin told her about his plans for his ranch, his hope to expand his herd and maybe plant an orchard in the irrigated bottomland near his house. He spoke with the careful optimism of a man who had learned not to expect too much, but could not quite kill his dreams. "What about you?" he asked. "Do you plan to stay in Jerome, keep running your laundry?" Beatrice had never let herself think beyond the next day's work, the next week's rent. "I suppose so. I have built something here. It may not be much, but it is stable." "But is it what you want?" The question struck her silent. Want? She had stopped thinking about what she wanted years ago, had learned to focus on what was practical, what was possible for a woman like her. "I do not know," she admitted finally. I wanted to survive, and I have. Beyond that, I have not dared to think." Benjamin was quiet for a moment, watching the changing colors of the sky. "I spent years just surviving too, working for other people, saving every penny, never letting myself imagine anything better. Then one day I realized I was going to wake up old and alone, having never really lived at all. That was when I decided to buy my land and build something of my own." "And has it made you happy?" "Happier," he said carefully. "But the ranch is still lonely. A house feels empty when there is no one to share it with." The implication hung in the air between them, and Beatrice felt her pulse quicken. Was he suggesting what she thought he was suggesting? It was too soon, too fast. They barely knew each other. Yet some part of her had already recognized something in Benjamin, some fundamental compatibility that went deeper than time or circumstance. They were both survivors, both people who had rebuilt themselves from ruins and learned to carry on despite loneliness and hardship. "I should get back," she said, suddenly afraid of where this conversation might lead. "I have work early tomorrow." If Benjamin was disappointed by her retreat, he did not show it. He helped her to her feet, and they made their way back down the hill in companionable silence. At her door, he said, "May I see you again tomorrow?" "Yes," Beatrice said, unable to deny herself that much. Over the next several days, Benjamin found excuses to extend his stay in Jerome. The cattle deal kept falling through and being renegotiated. He needed to wait for money to be transferred. He wanted to look at some mining equipment to possibly resell. Each reason bought him another day, another evening to spend with Beatrice. They fell into a pattern. Benjamin would appear at her shop in the evening after her work was done. Sometimes they would walk, sometimes they would eat at Mrs. Wang's. Sometimes they would simply sit in her shop and talk while she did mending. She learned about his childhood in Kentucky, about the father he had loved and lost to drink after the war destroyed their family business. He learned about her brief marriage, about the wagon journey west that had nearly killed her, about the small triumphs and daily struggles of running a business as a woman alone. The people of Jerome noticed, of course. Mrs. Caldwell made pointed comments about propriety when she came to collect her linens. Several miners made crude jokes within Beatrice's hearing, speculating about what the cowboy saw in the fat laundress. Each comment was a small knife, but Beatrice had developed thick skin over the years. She told herself their opinions did not matter. What mattered was the way Benjamin looked at her, the way he listened when she spoke, the way his face lit up when she made him laugh. What mattered was that she had started to think about the future again, to imagine possibilities beyond endless washing and solitude. On the 7th evening, Benjamin arrived looking troubled. "What is wrong?" Beatrice asked immediately. "I need to go back to my ranch," he said. "The cattle deal has fallen through completely, and I have responsibilities I cannot neglect any longer. I have been away too long already." Beatrice felt her heart sink even as she nodded understanding. Of course he had to go. She had known this was temporary, that he would ride out of her life just as she had first feared. "When will you leave?" she managed to ask. "Tomorrow morning, first light." He moved closer to her, his expression intense. "Beatrice, I do not want to go, or rather, I do not want to go without you." She stared at him, not comprehending. "Come with me," Benjamin said, taking her hands in his. "Come to the ranch, be my wife. I know it is sudden, and I know you have your business here, but I have to ask. These past days with you have been the happiest I have known. I do not want to go back to being alone, not when I have found you." Beatrice pulled her hands away, stepping back. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious." "Benjamin, look at me. Really look at me." Her voice came out harsh with old pain. "I am fat, I am plain, I am nobody special. You could find a dozen prettier, younger women who would jump at the chance to marry a man with his own ranch. I do not want any of those women, Benjamin said firmly. I want you. Do you think I care about your size? Beatrice, you are strong and capable and kind. You are honest and hardworking. You make me laugh. You understand what it means to build something from nothing. Those are the things that matter. People will talk. They will say terrible things about you for choosing someone like me. Then let them talk. I stopped caring what narrow-minded people thought a long time ago. He reached for her hands again, and this time she let him take them. I am not asking you to be some ornament or some perfect housewife from a picture book. I am asking you to be my partner, to build a life with me. Your size means nothing to me except that there is more of you to love. Tears stung Beatrice's eyes. No one had ever spoken to her this way, had ever made her feel like she was enough exactly as she was. I am scared, she whispered. So am I, Benjamin admitted. But I am more scared of letting you go and spending the rest of my life wondering what might have been. Beatrice looked into his face, searching for any sign of doubt or deception. She found only sincerity and a hope that mirrored her own. My business, she said weakly. I have built something here. Sell it or close it, or keep it and hire someone to run it for you. I do not care which. I just want you to have choices, not be trapped by circumstances. He squeezed her hands gently. I am not asking you to give up everything. I am asking you to come build something new with me. It was insane. They had known each other barely more than a week. This was the kind of rash decision that led to disaster and regret. But Beatrice had been practical and careful her entire life, and where had it gotten her? Alone in a cramped shop in a rough mining town, working herself to exhaustion for a life that held no joy, no warmth, no love. Maybe it was time to be reckless. Maybe it was time to reach for something more than mere survival. Yes, she said, and watched joy transform Benjamin's face. Yes, I will marry you. He pulled her into his arms, holding her with a tenderness that made her weep. She had forgotten what it felt like to be held, to be wanted, to matter to another person. The tears came harder, years of loneliness and hurt releasing in great shaking sobs against his chest. It is all right, Benjamin murmured, stroking her hair. I've got you. You are not alone anymore. When the storm passed, Beatrice pulled back and wiped her eyes, embarrassed by her outburst. But Benjamin just smiled and kissed her forehead. We should probably do this properly, he said. Is there a preacher in Jerome? Circuit preacher comes through every 2 weeks. But he was just here 3 days ago, so he will not be back for a while. Then we will stop in Prescott on the way to the ranch. There are preachers there and a judge if necessary. I want this done legal and proper. They spent the rest of the evening making plans. Beatrice would sell what she could of her shop equipment and supplies, give notice to her landlord, and settle her affairs. It would take a few days, so Benjamin would go ahead to his ranch and return to fetch her. He did not like leaving her, but they both knew it was practical. I will be back in 1 week, he promised. Can you be ready by then? I will make it work, Beatrice said. After he left, she sat in her shop surrounded by the trappings of her solitary life and tried to process what had just happened. She was getting married. She was leaving Jerome. She was starting over again, but this time not alone. Fear gnawed at her. What if this was all a mistake? What if Benjamin changed his mind once he was away from her? What if she was setting herself up for heartbreak? But beneath the fear ran a current of excitement and hope stronger than any doubt. Benjamin had seen her, truly seen her, and he had chosen her. That was worth risking everything for. The next morning, Benjamin left at dawn as planned. Beatrice threw herself into preparations, working with frantic energy to dismantle the life she had built. She sold her larger equipment to another laundress who was just starting out, pleased to give the young woman a fair price. and some advice about dealing with difficult customers. She sold smaller items to whoever would buy them. She gave notice to her landlord, who seemed unsurprised that she was leaving. "Saw you with that cowboy," he said, his tone neutral. "Figured you might be moving on. You have been a good tenant, always paid on time. I wish you well." It took 3 days to settle everything. On the 4th day, Beatrice packed her belongings into the same trunk she had brought west with her years before, plus 1 additional crate for items she had accumulated. It was not much to show for 3 years of work, but she had never been one to collect unnecessary things. Mrs. Wang cried when Beatrice came to say goodbye. "I am so happy for you," the older woman said, embracing Beatrice tightly. "That man, he sees you proper. He sees your good heart." "I will miss you," Beatrice said, her own eyes wet. "You have been a true friend to me." "You write to me, tell me how you are," Mrs. Wang insisted. "And if that man does not treat you good, you come back. I will feed you and hide you and hit him with my cooking spoon." Despite her tears, Beatrice laughed. "I promise." The waiting was agony. Each day felt like a week as Beatrice wondered if Benjamin would really return. Perhaps he had reconsidered. Perhaps the whole thing had been some elaborate joke. Perhaps she had imagined the entire thing in a fit of lonely desperation. But on the 7th day, exactly when he had promised, Benjamin rode into Jerome driving a wagon. Beatrice was waiting in front of her now empty shop, and when she saw him, relief flooded through her so strongly she felt weak. Benjamin jumped down from the wagon and came to her, taking both her hands. "Ready?" he asked, his eyes searching her face. "Ready," she confirmed. They loaded her trunk and crate into the wagon. Beatrice looked one last time at the building that had been her home, her workplace, her entire world for 3 years. She felt no regret at leaving it behind. The journey to Benjamin's ranch took 3 days. They traveled down from the mountains into the Verde Valley, the landscape gradually changing from rocky slopes to rolling grassland, dotted with cottonwoods and mesquite. They stopped in Prescott the first day, and true to his word, Benjamin took her directly to the courthouse, where a judge married them in a brief ceremony with 2 clerks as witnesses. Afterward, Benjamin bought her a simple gold ring from a jeweler, sliding it onto her finger with a solemnity that made the moment feel sacred despite the prosaic surroundings. "Now it is real," he said softly. "Now it is real," Beatrice echoed, looking at the ring on her hand and hardly believing it was there. They spent their wedding night in a hotel room in Prescott. Beatrice was terrified, certain that Benjamin would be disappointed by her body, but he was gentle and patient and made her feel cherished rather than merely tolerated. For the first time in her life, physical intimacy was something beautiful rather than an awkward duty to be endured. The next morning they continued south toward the ranch. Benjamin talked about what she would find there, tempering her expectations so she would not be disappointed. "It is not fancy," he warned. "The house is small, just 3 rooms. The barn is bigger than the house, honestly. But the land is good, and there is water year-round from the creek." "It sounds perfect," Beatrice said honestly. She had never expected luxury, and the idea of a home that was truly hers was more precious than any mansion. They arrived at the ranch in the late afternoon of the 3rd day. The property sat in a small valley where a creek ran clear over smooth stones. The house was indeed small, built of adobe with a wooden porch, but it was solidly constructed and well maintained. Corrals and a barn stood behind the house, and cattle grazed in the pastures beyond. A grizzled man emerged from the barn as they drove up. Benjamin waved to him. "That is Tom Martinez," he explained to Beatrice. "He is my hired hand, lives in a cabin on the far side of the property. Good man, been with me for years." Tom came over as they stopped the wagon, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "You are back, boss, and with a lady, I see." "Tom, this is my wife, Beatrice." Tom's eyebrows rose, but his smile remained genuine. "Well now, that is fine news. Welcome, madam." It is about time Benjamin had someone to share this place with. Benjamin carried Beatrice's trunk into the house while Tom helped with the crate. Inside, the house was spare but clean. The main room served as kitchen and living area, with a fireplace for cooking and heat. A small bedroom opened off one side and a storeroom off the other. "I know it is not much," Benjamin said, looking around as if seeing the place through her eyes. "But we can add on, make improvements." "It is wonderful," Beatrice said, and meant it. The house had good bones and had been cared for. More importantly, it was far from the judgmental eyes and whispered comments of town. Here, she could simply be herself. They settled into married life with surprising ease. Beatrice took over the household tasks, which were considerable on a working ranch. She cooked meals for Benjamin and Tom, tended a vegetable garden behind the house, and handled the endless laundry and mending that ranch work generated. It was hard work, but different from what she had done in Jerome. This work she did for herself and for the man she loved, not for strangers who looked through her. Benjamin was attentive and affectionate, never taking her for granted. He brought her small gifts from town when he went for supplies: a length of pretty fabric, a book, a packet of flower seeds. He told her about his day over supper each evening, asking her opinion on ranch decisions. He held her each night and made her feel desired and precious. A month passed, then two. Summer heat settled over the valley, and Beatrice learned the rhythm of ranch life. She learned to recognize each of Benjamin's horses by sight, learned which cattle were troublemakers and which were docile. She befriended Tom's wife, Maria, who lived with him in their cabin and who welcomed another woman on the property with enthusiasm. "I am so glad you are here," Maria said one afternoon as they worked together preserving vegetables from the garden. "It has been lonely with only the men around. They are good men, but they do not talk about interesting things." Maria was a tiny woman, barely 5 feet tall, with the quick movements of a bird. She and Beatrice could not have looked more different, but they formed a fast friendship based on compatible temperaments and shared work. As summer turned toward fall, Beatrice began to suspect she was pregnant. The signs were unmistakable: missed courses, morning queasiness, a new tenderness in her breasts. She said nothing at first, waiting to be certain, but as the weeks passed and the symptoms continued, she could no longer deny it. She told Benjamin one evening after supper, nervous despite knowing he would be pleased. "I think I am going to have a baby," she said without preamble. Benjamin froze with his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. Then he set it down carefully and pulled her into his arms. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without a doctor. All the signs are there." He held her at arm's length, his face glowing with joy. "This is wonderful. We need to get you to a doctor, make sure everything is all right, and you should not be working so hard. You need to rest more." "I am pregnant, not invalid," Beatrice protested, but she was pleased by his concern. Women have been having babies and doing farm work for thousands of years. Still, she let him fuss over her, let him insist she not carry heavy things or work in the heat of the day. His care was precious to her, this visible proof that she and the child she carried mattered to him. They made the trip to Prescott so a doctor could examine her. He confirmed what she already knew. She was about 3 months along, the baby would come in the spring, and everything appeared normal and healthy. "You are strong and in good health," the doctor told her. "I see no reason why you should not have a straightforward delivery. Keep eating well and do not overtire yourself. On the way home, Benjamin was quiet, his expression thoughtful. "What are you thinking about?" Beatrice asked. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," he said. "6 months ago, I was alone and lonely, going through the motions of living without really being alive. Now I have you, and soon we will have a child. It feels like more than I deserve." "You deserve every bit of it," Beatrice said firmly. "You are a good man, Benjamin Hawthorne, and I am the lucky one." He reached over and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. They rode the rest of the way home in contented silence. Winter came to the Verde Valley, mild compared to the mountain winters of Jerome, but still cold enough to require fires and warm clothes. Beatrice's belly grew steadily, and by January she could no longer see her feet. Benjamin had built a cradle during the long evenings, working the wood with patient skill until it was smooth and beautiful. Maria knitted tiny clothes and blankets, exclaiming over each kick and movement as Beatrice's belly shifted and jumped with the baby's activity. "Strong baby," Maria pronounced. "Will be big and healthy like the father." Beatrice hoped the baby would be healthy, but she privately worried that it might inherit her size and face the same judgments and cruelties she had endured. She tried to push those fears away, focusing instead on preparing everything the baby would need. In March, when the cottonwoods were beginning to leaf out and the air carried the scent of warming earth, Beatrice went into labor. It happened in the middle of the night, sharp pains waking her from sleep. She shook Benjamin awake. "It is time," she said, trying to keep her voice calm despite the fear clutching at her. Benjamin went pale but moved quickly, building up the fire and sending Tom riding hard for the doctor in Prescott. Maria came to the house and took charge, heating water and laying out clean linens with the efficiency of someone who had done this before. The labor was long and hard, lasting through the night and into the next day. Beatrice had never felt pain like this, waves of agony that took her breath and made her scream despite her determination to be stoic. Benjamin stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping the sweat from her face, murmuring encouragement. The doctor arrived in the late afternoon, examining Beatrice and pronouncing that everything was progressing normally, if slowly. "First babies often take their time," he said. "You are doing fine, Mrs. Hawthorne. Just keep breathing through the pains." As evening fell, the pains intensified to the point where Beatrice thought she could not endure another moment. Then, with a final massive effort that felt like it might tear her apart, the baby came in a rush of fluid and relief. "It is a boy," the doctor announced, holding up the squalling infant. "A big, healthy boy." Benjamin was crying, tears streaming down his face as the doctor cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a blanket before placing him in Beatrice's arms. She looked down at her son, at his red, wrinkled face and his tiny fists waving in indignation, and felt her heart expand to a size she had not known was possible. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." They named him Daniel after Benjamin's father. He was indeed a big baby, over 8 pounds according to the doctor's scale, and healthy in every way. His arrival transformed the household. Tom became an unofficial uncle, carving small toys in his spare time. Maria taught Beatrice the songs she had sung to her own children, lullabies in Spanish that seemed to soothe Daniel when nothing else would. Benjamin was a devoted father, never complaining about lost sleep or the disruption to the household routine. He would walk the floor with Daniel for hours if the baby was fussy, talking to him in a low voice about the ranch and the cattle and anything else that came to mind. Watching her husband with their son, Beatrice felt a contentment so profound it frightened her. She kept waiting for something to go wrong, for this happiness to be snatched away, But days turned into weeks and then months, and her life remained blessed. Daniel grew quickly, a robust baby who smiled early and laughed often. By the time he was 6 months old, he was trying to crawl, pulling himself across the floor with determined effort. Benjamin built a playpen to keep him safe and corralled, but Daniel regarded it as a challenge rather than a limitation. Life settled into a new rhythm, busier than before but richer. The ranch prospered under Benjamin's management. He bought more cattle, expanded the pastures, and built a better barn. Beatrice kept the household running, caring for Daniel and managing the endless tasks that kept everyone fed and clothed. When Daniel was a year old, Beatrice realized she was pregnant again. This time the news felt less shocking, more like a natural progression. Benjamin was just as delighted as he had been the first time. "I always wanted a big family," he admitted. "I was an only child and I hated how quiet our house was. I want our home to be full of noise and life and laughter." The second pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Beatrice knew what to expect. She continued her work around the ranch, with Maria helping to watch Daniel when Beatrice needed to rest. The baby came in the fall, this time a girl. She was smaller than Daniel had been, with a head of dark hair and lungs that announced her displeasure at being thrust into the world. They named her Sarah, after Beatrice's mother who had died when Beatrice was young. With 2 small children, the house felt very crowded. Benjamin started building an addition, working in the evenings and on days when ranch work was light. He expanded the house by 2 rooms, giving Daniel a small bedroom of his own, and creating a nursery for Sarah that could later become another bedroom. The years flowed by, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Daniel became a sturdy boy who followed his father everywhere, determined to learn ranching from the time he could walk. Sarah was quieter, more thoughtful, content to help her mother in the garden or play with the kittens in the barn. When Daniel was 5 and Sarah was 3, Beatrice gave birth to twins, 2 boys they named Thomas and John. The house was now truly full of noise and chaos, just as Benjamin had wanted. Beatrice often fell into bed exhausted at the end of each day, but it was a good exhaustion, the kind that came from purpose and love. The ranch continued to prosper. Benjamin hired another hand to help Tom, a young man named Pete who was learning the cattle business. They built a proper bunkhouse for the hired men, which freed up Tom and Maria's cabin for their growing family as well. Beatrice sometimes thought back to her life in Jerome, to the lonely laundress who had believed herself invisible and unworthy of love. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone from another lifetime. She had been transformed not just by Benjamin's love but by learning to see herself through his eyes, capable, valuable, deserving of happiness. She still had moments of insecurity, times when she looked at her expanding body after multiple pregnancies and wondered how Benjamin could still find her attractive. But he always seemed to know when those doubts crept in, and he would pull her close and remind her with words and touch that she was exactly what he wanted. One evening when the twins were about 2 years old, Beatrice and Benjamin sat on the porch after the children were asleep, enjoying the cool night air and the quiet that was so rare in their busy household. "You ever regret it?" Beatrice asked. "Marrying me so quickly?" "Sometimes I think about how mad it was, how we barely knew each other." Benjamin was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. "I have never regretted it for a single moment," he said finally. "But I understand what you mean. It was reckless by most standards. We took a huge gamble on each other. But it worked out," Beatrice said. "It worked out because we were both willing to try, both willing to build something together." He took her hand. "And because I saw something in you from the very first day." You were working so hard, your hands were bleeding, and when that gunshot went off, you just kept working. Everyone else ran to see the excitement, but you stayed with your task. That told me something about your character. I just thought no one would notice whether I was there or not, Beatrice admitted. I noticed. I saw a woman who was strong and capable and who did not give up even when things were hard. I saw someone who understood what it meant to work for something and not wait for life to hand you gifts. He squeezed her hand. I saw someone like me, someone who had survived and kept going. That was what I needed, what I wanted, not some pretty girl who would wilt at the first hardship. Beatrice leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. I am glad you saw me. Really saw me when I thought I was invisible. You were never invisible, Beatrice. You just needed someone to look properly. They sat together in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the night. Cattle lowing in the distance, the creek running over stones, an owl calling from the cottonwood grove. This was her life now, and it was more than she had ever dared to dream of during those lonely years in Jerome. The children grew, as children do. Daniel became a skilled young horseman, working alongside his father and learning the ranching business with serious dedication. Sarah developed a talent for drawing, covering any scrap of paper she could find with pictures of horses and cattle, and the landscape she loved. The twins were holy terrors, inseparable, and always getting into mischief that left Beatrice exasperated and laughing in equal measure. When Daniel was 12, Benjamin began teaching him about the financial side of ranching, showing him how to track expenses and income, how to judge market conditions, how to plan for lean years. He wanted his son to understand that ranching was not just about working cattle, but about managing a business. Sarah helped her mother more as she got older, taking on kitchen tasks and childcare responsibilities with quiet competence. She was gentle with the twins, patient in a way that Beatrice admired. The ranch continued to expand slowly and steadily. Benjamin bought more land when it became available, always careful not to overextend their finances. He had learned caution during his lean years, and prosperity had not made him reckless. Beatrice had never been happier, yet she carried a small seed of worry. Her health had always been good, but she noticed she tired more easily now, that tasks which once felt manageable now left her breathless. She said nothing to Benjamin, not wanting to worry him, but Maria noticed. "You should see the doctor," Maria said one day as they worked together canning vegetables. "You do not look well." "I am just tired," Beatrice protested. "4 children keep me busy. It is more than tired." "Please, Beatrice, for the children if not for yourself." Reluctantly, Beatrice agreed. Benjamin took her to Prescott and the doctor examined her thoroughly. His expression grew serious as he listened to her heart and checked her pulse. "Your heart is strained," he said finally. "The pregnancies and the physical labor have taken a toll. You need to rest more, avoid heavy work, and take this medication daily." He wrote out a prescription. "I am not saying you are in immediate danger, Mrs. Hawthorne, but you need to take care of yourself." The news frightened Beatrice more than she wanted to admit. She was only 42 years old. She had thought she would have many more years to watch her children grow, to grow old with Benjamin. Benjamin took the news hard as well, his face pale as they drove home. "You are going to rest," he said firmly. "We will hire someone to help with the housework. You are not to lift anything heavy or work yourself to exhaustion anymore. Benjamin, we cannot afford to hire help just for me. Then we will make it work anyway. Beatrice, I did not find you and build this life with you only to lose you because you worked yourself to death." His voice broke slightly. "You are the center of everything. The children need you. I need you. Please do what the doctor says." So Beatrice slowed down, learning to accept help from Maria, and from a young woman they hired from town. It was hard for her, she who had always prided herself on her capability and strength. But she took the medication faithfully and tried to rest when her body demanded it. The children noticed the change but adapted to it. Sarah took on even more responsibilities, and the twins, now 8 years old and somewhat calmer than they had been, tried to be more helpful around the house. Daniel, nearly 14, became even more serious about learning the ranching business, as if preparing himself to take over if the worst happened. But the worst did not happen. The medication helped, and with reduced workload and stress, Beatrice's health stabilized. She would never have the boundless energy of her youth, but she could still participate fully in family life, could still sit on the porch in the evenings with Benjamin and watch their world turn golden in the sunset light. More years passed. Daniel grew into a man, tall and capable like his father, and married a rancher's daughter from Prescott when he was 21. They built a house on the far edge of the ranch property, and Daniel became Benjamin's full partner in running the operation. Sarah met a young teacher at a social in town and fell in love with his quiet intelligence and kind manner. They married when she was 19 and moved to Prescott where he taught at the school. She visited often, bringing her own children as they came along. The twins took different paths. Thomas became a blacksmith, apprenticing in Prescott and eventually opening his own shop. John, always the more restless of the two, went to California to seek his fortune, though he wrote regularly and visited when he could. Beatrice and Benjamin grew old together, their hair turning gray and then white, their bodies slowing but their love undimmed. They spent their days working less and resting more, enjoying the presence of grandchildren who filled the house with noise and laughter during visits. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Benjamin gave Beatrice a locket containing a tiny photograph of the two of them taken years earlier. "I want you to remember," he said as he fastened it around her neck, "that you were always beautiful to me. From that first day when I walked into your shop, I saw you, really saw you, and I have loved you every day since." Beatrice touched the locket, tears in her eyes. "You made me feel seen when I thought I was invisible. You gave me a life I never imagined I could have. How do I thank you for that?" "You do not need to thank me. Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life." They kissed, still finding joy and comfort in each other after all these years, still partners in every sense of the word. Beatrice lived to be 64, her heart finally giving out one night as she slept peacefully beside Benjamin. He found her in the morning, still and cold, her face serene. The grief nearly destroyed him, but he held on for their children and grandchildren, for the legacy they had built together. He lived another 5 years, running the ranch with Daniel until his own health failed. On his deathbed, surrounded by family, he asked for Beatrice's locket. They placed it in his hand and he held it against his chest. "I am coming, love," he whispered. "Wait for me." He died with a smile on his face, and his children knew he had gone to find Beatrice wherever she was waiting. They buried Benjamin next to Beatrice on a hillside overlooking the ranch, where they could watch over the land they had built together. On the shared headstone their children had inscribed, "Benjamin and Beatrice Hawthorne. He saw her. She loved him. Together they built a life." The ranch passed to Daniel and his children, and then to their children in turn. But the story of Benjamin and Beatrice lived on in family lore, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. The story of the cowboy who looked past surface appearances to see the worth within, and the laundress who learned she was never truly invisible, only waiting to be seen by the right eyes. It became a touchstone for the family, a reminder that love was about seeing and being seen, about choosing each other every day, about building something lasting through hard work and dedication. The values Benjamin and Beatrice had lived by continued in their descendants. Hard work, kindness, the importance of looking deeper than appearances. Daniel made sure his own children knew their grandmother's story, how she had survived alone and built a business through sheer determination, how she had risked everything on love and faith. He wanted them to understand that strength came in many forms, that worth was not measured by society's narrow standards. Sarah's children grew up hearing about the grandfather who noticed the invisible woman and loved her without reservation. She taught them that real love saw past the surface to the person within. That character mattered more than appearance. The twins told their nieces and nephews about parents who had loved each other deeply and completely, who had created a home full of warmth and laughter, despite both having started from places of loneliness and hardship. Years became decades, and the Verde Valley changed around the ranch that Benjamin and Beatrice had built. Towns grew, roads improved, and the wild frontier became settled country. But the ranch remained, passing through generations, each one adding their own improvements while honoring the foundation laid by those two people who had taken a chance on each other in 1881. Eventually, a great-granddaughter of Benjamin and Beatrice, doing research into her family history, made the journey to Jerome. The old mining town had become a ghost town and then been reborn as an artist community. She walked the steep streets, trying to imagine her great-grandmother working in this place, invisible to most, waiting for someone to truly see her. She found where the laundry had been, though the building now housed a gallery. Standing there, she thought about how one moment of genuine human connection had changed everything. How a cowboy's kindness in noticing an overlooked woman had set in motion generations of love and family. She thought about the courage it must have taken for Beatrice to say yes, to leave behind the safety of what she knew for the uncertainty of love with a near stranger. She thought about Benjamin's ability to see worth where others saw only someone to ignore or mock. In a world that often reduced people to their appearance or their utility, Benjamin and Beatrice had seen each other as fully human, complex and valuable and deserving of love. That clarity of vision had been their gift to each other and, through their children and grandchildren, their gift to the future. The great-granddaughter returned to the ranch that evening, to the house that had been expanded and modernized over the years, but still stood on the same foundation Benjamin had built. She visited the graves on the hillside as the sun set, reading the inscription and thinking about the lives compressed into those few words. "Thank you," she whispered to the two people who had started it all. "Thank you for seeing each other. Thank you for being brave enough to love." The wind whispered through the cottonwoods, carrying the scent of sage and earth, and somewhere in the gathering dusk a cow lowed. The ranch lived on, would continue to live on, a testament to what two people could build when they chose to see past surfaces to the truth beneath. Benjamin and Beatrice's story was not one of dramatic rescues or grand gestures, though it had its share of courage and determination. It was simpler and perhaps more profound. The story of two lonely people who recognized each other, who chose each other, who built a life together one day at a time through work and love and unwavering commitment. In the end, that was the truest legacy they left behind. Not the ranch itself, though that was substantial. Not even the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their blood and their values. The real legacy was the proof that being seen, truly seen and accepted, could transform everything. That love based on genuine recognition of another person's worth could sustain through decades of hardship and joy alike. Beatrice had been invisible to most people in Jerome, dismissed, because her body did not conform to narrow standards of acceptability. Benjamin had noticed her, had seen her strength and capability and kindness, and in seeing her had given her the greatest gift one human can give another: the affirmation that she mattered, that she was valuable exactly as she was. And Beatrice, in return, had given Benjamin a home and a family, had seen the lonely man behind the self-sufficient cowboy facade, and had loved him completely. She had chosen to trust him with her heart despite every reason to protect herself, and that trust had been rewarded 1,000 times over. Their story proved that happy endings were possible, even for people the world had overlooked or dismissed, that it was never too late to find love and connection, that courage and hope could be rewarded, that seeing and being seen was perhaps the most fundamental human need, and fulfilling that need could change everything. As night fell over the Verde Valley, over the ranch that still bore the mark of Benjamin and Beatrice's labor and love, their story remained alive. Not just in the memories and tales passed down through generations, but in the very existence of the family and the land. Every fence post, every building, every acre of pasture was part of their legacy. But more than that, every time one of their descendants looked past surface appearances to see another person's true worth, every time someone in the family chose courage over safety, every time love triumphed over loneliness, Benjamin and Beatrice's story continued. It lived in actions and choices, in values upheld and lessons remembered. The obese laundress had been invisible to most, but the cowboy had noticed her and made her feel seen. And in that seeing, in that moment of genuine human connection in a dusty shop in Jerome, Arizona in 1881, they had created something that would last far beyond their own lives. They had proven that everyone deserves to be seen, to be valued, to be loved. That was the heart of their story, and it remained true long after they were gone.